On this episode of Stories Behind the Grind, listen to my conversation with Josh Blakeley, founder of JBL Spending Planners. We discuss how a Go Karting accident gave Josh clarity and direction, what young couples and aspiring business owners can do right now to take back control of their finances, and why having multiple mentors can accelerate your growth. Please note that the information contained on this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal situation. You should consider whether the information is appropriate to your needs and, where appropriate, seek professional advice from a financial advisor. My name is Aidan Vocalo, and here you will find business strategies, tips, and tactics that you can incorporate not only in your own venture, but your life, to help you simplify and strategically grow, scaling up the impact you are having in this world. Listen as I talk to creators, innovators, and game changers on what it takes to build an impactful business, uncovering their insights, strategies, and tips to help you increase profitability and develop a thriving team culture. Welcome to the Stories Behind the Grind podcast. Hi, Josh. Thanks so much for coming on the Stories Behind the Grind podcast. It's great to have you on.
Thanks, Aidan. Yeah, very grateful to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Josh, you empower young couples to take back control of their finances so that they're able to create and move towards a future where they're living with fulfillment and purpose. Where did the interest in money management come from?
Yeah, look, it stemmed from my own personal journey, really. Starting out, I grew up in a family where money really wasn't talked about in too much detail. And, you know, things were just kind of kept moving in the background. And then when I was 15, my father actually passed away really unexpectedly. And that changed the whole family dynamic. I knew he'd put things in place with the right insurances, because even through that, my brother and I were able to be put through private school. And my mum was able to look after us there and keep the household finances going. But I still got into my late teens, and I really hadn't learnt too much about personal finance. So it was a process of kind of trying to figure things out on my own, process of getting into credit card debt, getting a car loan and things like that. And I reached a point where I was really just spending everything I was earning, and something clicked. There's a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I've heard so many other people have read that, and that has kind of started things ticking in their head. But reading that helped me realize, look, I need to be doing something with my money. And so in my 20s, it was just learning about personal finance, which eventually transitioned into starting businesses on the side. And one of those businesses now is with the money coaching side and helping other people really just fast track through that process, so they don't have to just kind of struggle along not knowing what they're doing. I help set them up with a process and a system and the support to be empowered to actually control it themselves.
Yeah, and I guess, personal finance isn't really something that's taught a lot at schools either, is it? It's something that's sort of, I guess, at least for me anyway, when I was going through it, was sort of glossed over.
Yeah, that's true. And my background is as a maths and music teacher, and I would be teaching, 16, 17-year-olds about some financial maths, particularly things like compound interest and the power of that. But yeah, for a lot of those students, it was just so far off in the distance for them too. There were always some who were engaged, but I'd probably say at least 3/4 were usually, it seemed a bit foreign to them, which is scary because it's coming from their home, coming from their parents as well. And if their parents have never been taught, then that cycle, will just keep repeating.
Yeah, and I guess it's hard for kids to apply, I guess, the lessons learned at school. It's one thing to see, mum and dad spend the money in a sense, but if the kid themselves doesn't have income coming in, it's hard for them to see the benefit of it all. And so
yeah, definitely.
You end up with these young teenagers and young adults with this lack of personal finance knowledge.
That's it. And if they don't have that, as soon as they're starting to earn money and they have more free time, or maybe they're moving out of home, once they're 18, they can start getting credit cards and things like that too. So they have all these choices to make. And if they're lacking in financial literacy, then they can end up in a bit of a mess pretty quickly.
For sure. What are some common misunderstandings you see in the personal finance realm?
Probably the biggest thing is people just not really being clear on their current situation. That's the first step I take clients through in my initial conversations with people who are interested, is like, you really need to have a clear understanding, that clarity around what is your current financial situation, And for some people, that's a process of actually getting real. And it might be a bit of a wake-up call, particularly with couples. There might be one in the relationship who tends to maybe manage things, and the other one just goes along for the ride. So that process is actually getting them there where they're both understanding, exactly what it is that they're spending, what they need to live on for a minimum, what their income is, and then if they've got debt, how much debt do they have? How long is that going to take to pay off? And looking, what strategies can actually look at to maybe get rid of that quicker.
Got it. Sort of understanding where you are now, where you want to be, in the future, and then steps to get there.
Yeah. I think of it as like Google Maps. So I've just moved to San Diego, California here from Australia, and I don't know where I'm going. I'm slowly starting to get the hang of it, but Google Maps is my best friend when I'm driving around, and I put in my destination, and the first thing Google Maps has to do is actually zero in on my exact location. So I like to use that when talking about finances, because you can't work out how you're going to get to where you want to go until you have that clear picture of where you are right now.
Yeah, I guess it takes some humility in a sense as well to accept where you are right now. And I guess it's okay to be wherever you are right now as long as you've got a direction to go forward.
That's right. Yeah. You can start making the changes you need to. It doesn't matter where you're at. You can, once you have that kind of baseline position of where you're at, then you can start putting strategies in place to work out how best to achieve your goals.
What are some strategies, if you're happy to divulge, that you would recommend those in a similar situation, being say a young couple? What are some ways you'd recommend for them to get a hold of or to manage their money more effectively?
Yeah. So once they have a clear picture of where they're at, probably the biggest thing there is their debt, and looking through, what type of interest rate they have for the debt. So if they've got things like payday loans or credit cards that they're not paying off in time, those are going to have those really high interest rates, 15% or more. And having that still hanging around, that's really going to kind of cripple them moving forward. So the big thing is and I'm not talking about property loans here and things like that, where there may be like 5% interest if people own property. It's those, anything really above, 8% type of loans, to work on how do we get rid of that as quick as possible. And then also saving up an emergency buffer. And, a good place to start is just $1,000. And, it's pretty crazy that there are a lot of people who don't have even that $1,000 of a cash buffer in a bank account in case the worst happens. So starting there and building up an emergency fund, start with $1,000 and then looking at 3 months worth of living expenses to save up to. So once they know how much their living expenses are, they can start planning that and saving towards it. So once they've got the debt sorted, once they have an emergency fund together, that really sets up a really good foundation for whatever else they want to achieve financially.
Yeah, and I guess it develops those habits in that process that they can then use to achieve, more complex financial goals as well going forward. You've already got the habits embedded because you've paid down your debt. You've started to accrue an emergency fund, and you're working towards, that 3-month buffer, which is, I guess enough time to, if you lose your job to find a new one in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a change in mindset too, and I was guilty of this too, falling into the trap that you have a credit card and thinking that the credit card is your emergency fund. It's a really powerful feeling to know that you're in control once you break out of that zone of thinking. And I just fell into that because I was 18 and my bank sent me a letter to get a credit card, and it was just too easy to do. And a lot of people are in that situation, but as soon as you kind of break away from that reliance on the credit card and it's your own cold hard cash in an account, that is just really empowering.
Yeah, it is. It's, you've got that control then, it's your destiny in a way. And, you're no longer reliant on anyone else. And, with the stringent payment requirements and the high interest that come with credit card loans.
Yeah, exactly.
For those looking to start their own business, moving from a full-time job where you've got a, regular paycheck coming in, and then, moving from there to your own business where the cash flow can be quite lumpy, quite sporadic. What's your recommendation to manage that transition?
Yeah. I mean, some of the advice I was really given early on in starting my businesses was not to go cold turkey, not to ditch the full-time job completely and just go all in on the new business. And I remember one mentor, he just said, don't do it. Work on building the other business while you're working full-time. There's so many hours in the week that you can be taking away from unproductive tasks and spending on those avenues of building a business too. So probably my first point there is if you don't have to get out of the full-time job yet, I would avoid doing that if you can. And then the second point is around looking at how your business income is actually going to be paying your living expenses. And when you're in a salary and you have a really predictable income, one thing to set up, you can pretty quickly match what your expenses are to your income. When you have that lumpy cash, as you mentioned, that's a bit trickier as well. And it comes back to the first step too, having clarity on what your living expenses are. And once you know that, you can start to put together like what's the minimum I need to actually live to survive, to have a life that's somewhat comfortable, and that's everyone's personal preference. And then looking at what your business income is and really making sure your finances are separate from business and personal. Draw out that money like you would if you get paid in a full-time salary job, a regular transaction going into your personal accounts so that you can kind of treat it like you're working full-time and have that kind of benchmark. And then you've got your business goals as well on top of that. But if you can get your business looking like you're being paid regularly as like a salary job, that's the way to go.
Yeah, it's definitely, I love how your mentor mentioned that, don't just make the jump, go cold turkey and, figure it out from there. Definitely, you can definitely work on your business whilst working full time.
Yeah.
Say a full-time job's only 40 hours, there's still another, 30 or 40 hours in the week where you can be working on something else.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I was reading through a Facebook group yesterday, and someone had made that jump. They had made their jump from their full-time job to start their own business. They've gone cold turkey and they've realized a week in that, they're not making the money they thought they would. And now they're under all the stress and, anxiety and depression because they can't find the money to cover just basic living expenses. So it's definitely something not to jump in all of a sudden, to have a plan and have a bit of a base that you can build from.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, just planning it out. And, it could work if you've saved up a big cash buffer and you know what your living expenses are, and you can calculate how long is your cash buffer going to last you as well. But as often happens in business, we can underestimate how long it takes things to get moving or time frames and income like that. So it's still a lot more risky than continuing to work and building a business outside of that.
What was your journey like with the JBL Spending Planners? Did you find that there was a startup period where you had challenges that you had to overcome with the, balancing out the finances of it all?
Yeah, look, it was a process of working through that outside of my teaching job. That was my full-time job. Again, I had to work out what my expenses were and then see, how much income do I need to cover me for those, while having money to invest in the business as well. Because, particularly starting out, there's lots of education, support, mentoring that I've invested into with that. So I needed to make sure the business had income to cover those, as well as all the operating expenses like marketing and software and those types of things as well. So yeah, the biggest challenge really was giving myself that lead time to build the business while keeping my full-time job, and then making a decision once it hit a certain amount of income to start transitioning over to. And I do have another business in property development as well. So I do have that multiple stream of income too, which has helped me with that transition.
I'm curious, did you, when you were working full-time and doing your other businesses on the side, did you let your current employer know, or did you work on it, I guess, in secret? outside of the work?
Yeah, look, no, I would talk to people about it at work. And yeah, it wasn't kept a secret or anything like that. I mean, what I'm doing is supporting other people there as well. And, it was essentially down that path. As long as my, business wasn't taking away from my work duties, that was okay.
I'd love to go back to the moment where you were driving a go-kart and had a bit of an accident occur, how that sort of aligned yourself in your direction towards business. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that was definitely a pivotal moment in my entrepreneurial journey. So I think reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, probably when I was 18 or 19, that kind of started things ticking in my head at that age. But at that time, I really didn't know what I wanted to do in business. And the go-kart accident happened a number of years later. And I ended up in hospital, really. Doctors are around me checking my response, doing things like where they tap on your knee with a little hammer just to check, was I okay to walk? I ended up fracturing one of my vertebrae in my back. But at the time they didn't know all the details of that. I hadn't had an x-ray on it yet. And it was mainly checking for nerve damage. Fortunately, there wasn't any there, but I had my vertebrae was shattered and I was off work for a bit. And that moment was really scary because I was just thinking, what would my life look like if I couldn't walk? My work situation would change. We're very fortunate. We had insurance in Australia and, superannuation and things like that. But still, it got me thinking, like, do I just want to rely on an employer to support me if the worst happens, or would I rather be in control of something that I can manage myself and put the right systems in place, hire people as needed to work through it that way? And it was through that process I just started learning more, seeking out education around, and that was seeking out education around property investment. That whole stage of my kind of entrepreneur journey began by reading internet forums, reading magazines, podcasts, and attending meetup groups in Brisbane around property development and investment. And it started from there.
Yeah, I love the transition from it all. And to go, what if I can't rely on my employer to pay my bills in a sense? What can I do to, put myself in a better financial situation so that if the worst does happen, then I've got the capability to be independent in a sense.
Yeah. Which sounds like a pretty selfish reason for starting it off. But, sometimes we have those moments in life, don't we, where you just get that jolt, you get that something coming blindsiding you, and it just changes your whole way of how you look at life and how you think about what does the rest of your life want to look like. And that was definitely a moment there for me.
Yeah, for sure. Those pivotal moments that you go, well, that really sort of make you understand why you're here, why you want to be here. And I love how you're helping young couples, sort of take back control of their finances, because it's such an area that isn't really sort of delved in too much, I don't think. And you've got all these people coming out of, like we said earlier on, coming out of school or university and don't really have that money management education around them. It's definitely very important to educate and to help them manage their personal finances better.
Yeah. Look, and the starting point for most people is they feel like they're not in control of things. They're burdened by debt and stress and not feeling like they were where they thought they would be in life, or they feel like they're not getting ahead. So again, in that sense, it's a little bit like me, that it's very kind of inward focused and what they're feeling too. But I've seen the process unfold in my life as well as my clients, that when you start to get that control, one, you can really focus on other areas of your life, like in more detail. When money is not a problem, you can spend more time on your relationships, your health, and then even the next step, thinking through, what impact do I want to have? What's my purpose in life? What should I be doing with my time and my talents? And I just love seeing that journey unfold for people. And it's amazing when they can look back and I can look back and see, this is where you started. Here's everything we can celebrate that's happened along the way.
Yeah, those conversations must be life changing, not only for your clients but for yourself, to see the impact you're having yourself on people's journeys and where people could end up, once they have a personal finance plan in place.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just the opportunities are endless. I'm not expecting everyone would want to start businesses as well, but if people start to see that as a possibility, or they realize they can be doing a side hustle, and that type of thing grows into their full-time job, that, they're going to be helping other people. They might even be reaching stages where they're employing other people. Or maybe it's just they just want their time back to be with each other or family, or someplace where they're serving and volunteering as well.
Yeah. Like I said, the possibilities are endless. And you're actually writing a book to sort of help people along their way. I was wondering, what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome in writing the book?
Yeah, look, probably the biggest thing is just being consistent in writing the content for the book. So I've had to really work out, what part of my day is most productive. For me, it's the mornings. Generally, I have a bit of a morning routine, and then I just had blocked out in my day the mornings, usually 9 till 11, to work on my book. And I had a structure in place I'd put together for it, but it was just, my phone's on do not disturb mode. I've closed my internet browser. It's just me there writing and doing that most weekdays and sticking to that. It just adds up, and being consistent. And that was definitely my biggest way of getting around writer's block and being distracted for that, for sure.
Yeah, just being consistent in the process. You obviously had like you said, did you design the plan to begin with, and then started to fill in the elements of the plan going along?
Yeah, I had a structure in place based on the process I take clients through, and mapping that out through the different steps, and then collecting research to put in there too, sharing my story, sharing stories of clients and people I've spoken to who going through that journey as well. And mapping it out that way. So every day I'd have my titles already in there, so I knew what I need to focus on for that day.
You had some direction and some structure and a framework to follow.
Yeah.
You may not know, but do you know when the book will be released?
I'm wanting to release it, second half of 2019.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, not too far off, but yeah, I've got my kind of first draft together now. So yeah, it's now working through the next stages of getting that ready.
I can't wait to see it come out and come on the market.
Yeah, thanks, Aidan. I'll send you a copy.
Thank you. Josh, you mentioned you had a few mentors in your sort of entrepreneurial journey. Who has been a major influence in your life, and what did they teach you?
Yeah, look, I like to have specific mentors for different areas of my life. From getting involved in property investment, there's a property investment mentoring service called Results Mentoring that I'm a part of. So my mentor there, a guy named Brendan Kelly, I speak to him every week, and pretty much I've spoken to him every week for the last 3.5 years or so. And so my property investment side of business is always there. He's my go-to, and when I need someone to talk to, or somebody to talk through numbers with, or show different parts of what I'm doing in property, he's there as well. I have other business mentors as well, spiritual mentors through church, and I don't know if I call them always mentors as much, but definitely people for my health that I'm doing physical activity with, or gym and workouts and things like that, where there's natural kind of accountability there to help out, and I can always learn from there. So different areas, but absolutely so key, so important for that.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. It's important to have different mentors. Every mentor is going to have a different skill set, and it's important to sort of cover, as many bases as you can. I think a lot of people sometimes find it a struggle to find a mentor. How did you start the conversation with those that are your mentors now?
Yeah, some of it was a bit more organic. I mean, it was people I was just around, different interest groups or community, like church community there as well. Others, it was they had to kind of sell me their mentoring services. And as I was learning about different areas of business, going to a workshop or going to a day seminar to learn about what they were doing and working through that, do I connect with this business? Do I connect with how they mentor people? What have their past and current clients' results been? And making that decision there to put the money on the line and dive in and pay for mentoring there as well. And certainly, just in doing that, they've all been incredibly beneficial, I guess, with the caveat there that if you're doing something like that, you have to put in the work, you have to put in the action, and you have to be proactive in making that relationship work or that service or program working.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just find a mentor and expect the mentor to do everything for you. You have to take some responsibility in the whole process as well. That they can certainly guide and encourage. Yeah, I think that there is a bit of a common misconception about the mentor just, there to do all the work for you and as a way for you to outsource what you're doing.
No, it doesn't work like that.
Final question for the podcast. A question I like to ask all guests is, what's your definition of the grind?
Definition of the grind. I definitely don't think I like the saying work smarter, not harder. So using your creativity to work out the best way to run your business or to work on, your entrepreneurial goals and getting into a zone where you're always trying to look for what is another efficient way to do this or better, faster, more value for your clients and using that creativity. I believe we're all creative and in business it's really rewarding because you get to put your creativity into what you're doing. Definitely not just blindly working away on things and trying to get things to happen that way. Thinking through and, are you working on the most important part of your business that you should be right now is, often a question I ask myself when I'm in grind mode, when I have my calendar booked out to really work on those parts of my business.
Yeah, that's such an important question to ask. Is what I'm doing right now the most important thing to be doing? Yeah,
the book called The One Thing, that's an incredible book. I run that through my mind every day. It's a good test, especially when starting my day and working out what's the most important thing to accomplish today.
For sure, especially when you've got so many competing priorities and you've got a to-do list that never ends. It's
yes.
And the more you try to get through your to-do list, the more things you add to it. At least that's what I'm finding anyway.
No, yeah, I have the same experience too.
I've gotten to the point where I've got multiple to-do lists. But yeah, no, it's definitely something to definitely an overarching question to come back to is, what's the most important thing I can be doing right now and am I doing it?
Yeah. And it's usually pretty quick to clarify, what you should be doing when you actually stop. But you've got to stop, don't you? You've got to give yourself time and give yourself that space to reflect on your day.
That's it. Yeah, you can't be go all the time. You definitely need that space to sort of stand back, to reflect, and then to go, okay, what's the next thing to do? I think people can get stuck in a bit of a loop where they just keep working harder and harder and harder and burning themselves out and then thinking they can't have a break because that's less time to work on the business or in the business. But it's the opposite really. When you take a step back, even if it's just for half an hour or an hour, that sort of gives you the freedom to explore and to discover and to realize, maybe what you've been working on isn't the most important thing.
Yeah.
Or maybe it is, and it gives you ways to, like you said, to work smarter around it and find quicker, better, more efficient ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And Josh, where can people find more about you?
Look, they can check me out. My money coaching business is JBL Spending Planners.com. So they can reach me there, or they can send me an email, josh@jblspendingplanners.com. Yeah, or connect through LinkedIn or Facebook, anywhere like that as well.
No worries, and we'll put the links up in the show notes for this podcast.
Awesome.
No worries. Josh, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you, Aidan. Thanks for your time.
If this is the first time you've listened to the podcast, I appreciate you for stopping by. Please subscribe. Otherwise, if you took away valuable advice from this episode, I'd love for you to share it with others. Until next time.